I'd been asked to make a film about swifts conservation. On the face of it, the swifts' issues and solutions seem pretty simple. On the one hand, a housing shortage resulting from unsympathetic modern building practices. Counterbalancing that, hopefully, goodwill aplenty, stretching from proper swift nuts smashing holes in their homes to district councils with dynamic biodiversity action plans. But perhaps the nub of the problem wasn't the loss of nesting sites. That merely the symptom of an unswiftified world that frankly didn't care. So, what to do? I resolved to get out there and meet some more swifters. Learn more about the creatures themselves, the devil birds as they were known since medieval times, and see what knowledge, inspiration and footage came out of that. It sounded like a plan. Chris helped me prepare a local hit list, which kicked off with a short trip to Oxford. And on a sunny day in May, I can think of no better place on earth to start. Set aside fears of the inexorable efficiency of its traffic wardens, the Oxford experience is simply peerless. Dabbling in Swift books and on the web, I encountered an interesting factoid connecting Oxford and swifts. The bird known in heraldry as the martlet, often depicted without legs, features in the crest of two colleges, Worcester and University College, and is understood to depict resourcefulness and/or industriousness. Swift connections with Oxford stretch beyond heraldry. The University Museum of Natural History is the home to one of the most extensive studies of swifts anywhere in the world. In 1947, the evolutionary biologist and ornithologist David Lack had noticed swifts nesting in the tower's redundant ventilation shafts. Working through the university's Edward Gray Institute, he organised modification and augmentation of the existing nesting sites and set about a study of the birds which extends to this day, and which is encapsulated in his landmark book on the subject, Swifts in a Tower, the little red book of any swifter worth his salt, although Chris's copy was blue. Lack died in 1973, but recently retired Roy Overall spent over 40 years in the tower, ringing the feet of birds for identification purposes and helping ensure their well-being in support of the ongoing study. Swifts had only just arrived, and I asked Roy to share some knowledge on their breeding and nesting habits.
I've ringed somewhere in the region of 5,500 swifts. About 4,800 of those were juveniles. If a bird is ringed as an adult in this tower, it will probably come back to the same nest site. If the bird is ringed as a juvenile pullus, it virtually never comes back.
It was early days in the season, but I was granted a tantalising glimpse of the creatures in fairly close proximity from within the dark, eerie and stuffy atmosphere of the tower, where David Lack, his wife Elizabeth and Roy had spent decades painstakingly studying the birds.
The birds that get here first tend to be the adults that have been nested here several previous years. They know exactly where they're going, they know exactly which nest box is theirs, and they're going to get stuck in there. And they will fight against any other bird that tries to come in and take their nest over. And some fights go on for hours because once they've locked their claws into each other, it's very difficult to get them to separate.
No signs of fighting on this occasion, but from outside the tower it was possible to see birds entering through the modified ventilation shafts. In my own little way, I made a study of one poor bird. Well, I assume it was one, it's hard to say, but take a look at this. This guy or gal just wouldn't give up trying to get in through the tiny aperture, those stubby feet incapable of gripping onto the sloping surface of the tiles. I counted 5 efforts within the space of half an hour, but see this. It takes only about 6 frames for the bird to crash and turn about 180 degrees. Filming here at 60 frames per second, that's about 1/10 of a second. Like some 17th century amateur natural scientist, I got the idea in my head that maybe these birds operate in a domain where time is, for them, slowed down. Like their tiny brains are processing everything 5 or 10 times faster than us. Now, I'd read in Chris's little blue book that a BBC sound engineer in the 50s had slowed down the screeches of swifts and discovered they weren't screeches at all. I gave it a go. Spooky stuff, perfect for whoever makes the next Jurassic Park, I thought. I digress. I had more to learn from Roy.
Then, of course, they start to build a nest, and they mate on the wing, that's been seen, and I've seen them mating in the nest as well. And there's a lot of mutual preening goes on in the nest. And they bring in lots of aerial material that they've picked up, grass clippings, cellophane, tissue paper, anything that's like drifting about in the air. I've even had butterfly wings. And then they commence laying 3 eggs, is the normal. If the weather turns bad, then these eggs will probably be ejected. They will either push them out of the nest hole, push them into a corner out of the way, or I sometimes think that they probably eat them, because the strain on this bird of producing 3 eggs that needs calcium in it for the shells is quite great. And when you consider that we don't really know where the calcium comes from, it's certainly not in insects, which is the diet of birds.
It's clear that the life cycle of swifts is one of unending toil in the name of survival. Evolution seems to plot a course free of sentiment. The kind-hearted swift who, lacking nourishment for its young, went hungry to ensure the offspring's survival, died and failed to pass on its kindly genetic code. Roy had more to share.
Swifts actually stay in the nest for anything up to 5, even 6 weeks, even longer sometimes. So you can see that in that course of that time, they've actually fed, they've got overweight in fact, and they've got all their feathers and things like this, and they're all wing feathers and everything. So they're ready to fly, except that they tend to be overweight. They actually weigh more than the adults then. Quite often the adults will say, "Oh, migration urge, I'm going," and they clear off. And the young bird sits there and it keeps on exercising and flapping its wings and looking for somebody to feed it, but of course there's nobody there to feed it. And so it's losing weight, of course, if it's not being fed. But whilst this process is going on, the wing feathers are actually growing. And when they grow to the correct wing length, that's it. The hunger's got them, so they're off. And so they leave. And so they quite often don't even see their parents. But a lot of this is conjecture, of course, because we don't know what happens to them the moment they leave the nest.
Roy Overall, 40 years plus, ringing birds in stifling conditions, all in the name of extending our understanding of the world around us. I resolved to return to the tower later in the season, but for now I felt I was graduating from swift dunce to E-grader.